आपका नया
Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. Gaza's civil defence has reported that a further 20 people have died amid continued Israeli attacks in the enclave. It comes as US President Donald Trump has met for a second time in 2 days with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu discussing a potential Gaza ceasefire. Ukraine says Russia has launched a record number of drones overnight, with missiles also targeting Kyiv and western Ukrainian regions. Russian officials say Ukrainian drones have been downed that targeted the capital Moscow and the Kursk region. This comes as US President Donald Trump criticised the Russian president, stating he is not happy with Putin, while also saying he was considering steep Russian sanctions. The US leader also said he'd finally approved the sending of defensive weapons to Ukraine. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he is cautiously optimistic over a US-EU trade deal ahead of Donald Trump's new August 1st deadline. Meanwhile, the US president announced that the US will impose a new 50% tariff on copper, with a pharmaceutical levy that may reach 200%. A group of scientists based in the UK have estimated that 2,300 people died in a 10-day period after record heat waves struck Western Europe. Temperatures rose 4 degrees above average, with wildfires also causing significant damage. At least 9 people have died after a portion of a bridge collapsed in Vododara district in the Indian states of Gujarat, sending 5 vehicles plunging into the Mahisagar River during the morning rush hour. Authorities fear the death toll may rise as search and rescue operations continue. Texas Governor Greg Abbott says that authorities are still searching for more than 180 people who are unaccounted for, 4 days after devastating flash flooding in Texas. The death toll has risen to at least 110 as hopes of finding survivors diminishes. And Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has vowed not to quit office despite an ongoing corruption scandal. The future of Sanchez's minority coalition government has been cast into doubt. We start this hour in the Middle East, specifically in Gaza, where 20 Palestinians have reportedly been killed in overnight Israeli strikes, with 10 victims from a single family. That, according to the Gaza Civil Defense Agency. The first strike hit the Al-Mawazi region of Khan Yunis, while a second targeted Al-Shati camp near Gaza City, injuring over 30, according to local sources. Eyewitnesses described the blast as massive, like an earthquake, reducing homes to rubble. Several people remain missing. Residents are calling it a horrific massacre as rescue teams search for survivors under the debris. Let's have a look at what some residents have had to say.
الساعة 12 بالليل بأمان الله، الأطفال نايمين والنساء نايمين والاختيار نايمين، كلهيتم يعني اللي استشهدوا كلهيتم نايمين، والأطفال كلهيتم نايمين، ما في حدا في الدار، لا عنا مقاومين ولا عنا ما يحزنون. وهدهم أمام الدار أمامكم، هذا هي الدار فوق راس الأطفال والنساء والاختيار. الحي هذا حي سكن مكتظ بالسكان، لا حذرونا ولا قالوا لنا اطلعوا ولا ما يحزنون ولا عنا أي مقاومين ولا أي.
صحينا لقينا المنطقة كلها دمار، جيناهم كلهم شهداء، فيش إصابات، كله شهداء، وبلغت الأولاد والأيديهم يعني من الضوء زي ما أنتم شايفين.
Well, joining us is Ali M. Abushbak, a Middle East affairs researcher who is joining us from Cairo. Ali, thank you very much for being here to speak with us. There has been a lot of diplomacy surrounding a potential Gaza ceasefire, and we will come to that shortly. But first, further attacks in the Gaza Strip being reported coming from Israel, with ministries and officials saying that dozens have once again died. How devastating is the situation currently on the ground for civilians living in the Gaza enclave?
Thank you, Joshua, for having me again. The thing is, the situation in Gaza is volatile, while there is a several of casualties from Gazan civilians, and as well as the day before yesterday, there is a 5 Israeli soldiers have been killed in ambush in the northern part of Gaza in Beit Hanun. At the same time, when Benjamin Netanyahu he's visiting the White House in America and meeting the president of America, Donald Trump. By the way, Joshua, it's a situation on the ground as well as it's a horrific. Yesterday at night, Israel have been targeting Khan Yunis. The governorate and the governorate is bearing the brunt of the IDF strike and attacking the tent of displaced people and shelterless people in Khan Yunis. More than 20 civilians, most of them women and children in Khan Yunis and in the Ashati refugee camp in Gaza City have been killed. And now, just now, we will have talking more than 6 civilians have been killed during gathering to receive humanitarian aid in southern part of Gaza in Rafah. Most of them also civilian have been gathering in the humanitarian distribution zone. So the things is up to now. Also the day before yesterday, Benjamin Netanyahu and Donald Trump, they are discussed the ceasefire in Gaza, and Donald Trump, he stressed about the ceasefire should be in Gaza ASAP, as soon as possible, and it's required for everyone in not only in America and also every politician in Europe. And we have witnessed also yesterday the French minister Emmanuel Macron, he stressed on this idea, should the ceasefire between Gaza and Israel held, and should be about two-state solution between Palestinian and Israel for comprehensive peace in the region. Things is in Gaza, it's up to now, it's unstable, while there is a casualties from both of sides, as I mentioned, from Palestinian side and also Israeli side. Palestinian resistance represented by Hamas militant group, they are also conducting a strike and conducting some about some clashes with Israelis. That truce in Khan Yunis and in northern part of Gaza, Beit Hanun, Jabalia, as well as worth mentioning that, Joshua, there is a 70% of Gaza have been seized by Israelis defense forces, by Israelis army, which just only 20% have been remained to survive for the Palestinian. Situation is completely miserable on the ground.
Yes.
Every eyes going through the news. They are eagerly waiting for that time where Gaza and Hamas and Israel reach to the deal in Qatar, Doha, and everyone is waiting for this moment, not only for resolve the conflict between Gaza and Israel, but also to take a breath from the civilians who was for more than 600 days. They were under the attack and under the trauma and continuous bombardment in Gaza.
Yes, Ali, we just want to state briefly that we haven't yet verified those claims of 6 casualties in southern Gaza at an aid site. Once we get that information confirmed, we will, of course, bring that to you. But Ali, I do want to look at the diplomatic efforts that are being made amidst the difficult situations for those living in Gaza, but also the families, loved ones, and people living in Israel amidst the holding of around 50 hostages. Of course, Netanyahu and Trump meeting, speaking over a 2-day period. Steve Witkoff, also on the front of a Gaza ceasefire, says that a deal is getting closer. How soon is it that Hamas takes some responsibility for the situation in Gaza and agree to a deal that has already been agreed by Israel and the mediators who have pushed this deal forward, both the US, Qatar and also Egypt, trying to move Hamas towards agreeing to at least the 60-day pause, given, of course, a devastating potential humanitarian crisis at play?
Joshua, the thing is the Hamas has a red lines that disarmed its group and displaced their their leader from Gaza. So as you mentioned, there is a lot of pressure on Hamas and Israel as well. Donald Trump, he's pressurizing Benjamin Netanyahu to accept the deal, and meanwhile also Qatar, Egypt, and some mediator like Palestinian American Bashara Bahbah, the minister of the deal between Hamas when they released the American Israeli soldier. So also all of them, they practice the pressure on Hamas to accept the deal. Hamas last week showed its flexibility about the deal, and they respond a positive about this deal, and some view change, and they consider it as a former change. But on the ground, Hamas is still exists, definitely in the ground. Under the tunnel, Hamas the tunnel as a strategic way to defend Israel and to extend their existence in Gaza. Also, we have witnessed several of pressure from the mediator and to Hamas to accept this deal. I guess Donald Trump yesterday, he said by tomorrow on Thursday, there is a good news maybe will happen, and they will reach out to the deal between Hamas and Israel. I'm so optimistic about this 60 days of truce or ceasefire between Hamas and Israel. And I guess this is the last chapter of the war between Gaza and Israel. And this is everyone's hoping this. Hamas has been completely demolished in this war, and I guess they are going through the accepting this deal between Israel, and I guess also after the Iran airstrike and after Iran ceasefire, Hamas, it will show they will play the politics with Israel, and I guess they will accept the deal, especially their pact or their main supporter during this war and before the war, Iran has been accepted the deal between Iran and Israel to ceasefire. And I guess Hamas nowadays, they will going through the same stage that Iran has been decided and taking. Also, we have witnessed several of Hamas leadership. They consider this ceasefire, 60 days of ceasefire, as a
We seem to have lost Ali there, the audio, but thank you very much, Ali Emma Bushback, for joining us. We, of course, will continue to bring you all the updates as work towards a Gaza ceasefire continues and as Israeli operations in the enclave also continue. But we now head over to Europe. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelenskiy is calling for tougher sanctions on Russia after what he describes as the largest drone assault since the war began. He urged allies to impose biting sanctions, including secondary restrictions on Russian oil exports. Ukraine's Air Force says Russia launched 728 drones and 13 missiles overnight, with air defences intercepting 718 of those drones and 7 missiles. The attack hit multiple regions, including Kyiv, Lviv, Dnipro, Kharkiv and Odessa, and is seen as a major escalation in Russia's drone warfare. Well, joining us to discuss these developments is Dr. Sergei Dvoryanov, President of the IDC Russia and Director of the WHD International Board. Dr. Dvoryanov, thank you very much for joining us live on the programme today. Zelensky saying this is the largest strike of the war so far. What's the significance of this in the face of pressure from Western nations, including the US overnight, regarding potential sanctions on Russia? Well, while we wait for Dr. Dvoryanov to rejoin us, of course, to give you some context on this war that is now into its 4th year, work on a ceasefire has been prominent in recent months, with 2 face-to-face talks between Russia and Ukraine held in Istanbul, that at a time when they hadn't spoken for 3 years. While prisoner of war exchanges took place, pressure on Russia to agree to a 30-day ceasefire from Western nations and Ukraine has so far led to no results. I understand we are once again joined by Dr. Dvoryanov. I will repose my question to you. What's the significance of these Russian strikes in the face of potential sanctions and further pressure from Western allies of Ukraine and Western nations on Russia to try and work towards a ceasefire?
First of all, I would like to start, like a religious philosopher, to give my comments that we are living in the changeable world, because it's a material world. In this world, we cannot have permanent friends and permanent enemies. Always the friends and enemies change their places. Because, see, our national leader, Vladimir Putin, he has his own historical mission. To complete this mission, put justice into international relations. First of all, number one. It's very important. He starts this mission when? He starts from the beginning of his presidency, which already more than 20 years. During these 20 years, it was a lot of different American presidents. Bush, it was Donald Trump, it was Biden, Joe Biden. They always tried to put their mission. But 2007, our honorable President Vladimir Putin started with his famous speech, multipolar world. His very, very famous speech. You can check. And all politicians right now, in General Secretary of United Nations, he use these words, multipolar world. That is important. And we should complete this mission. It's not like only America and West will decide who will play a role in the modern policy.
Dr. Dvoryanov, sorry to interject. Right. I just don't know where this conversation is going. I've asked you a question about strikes that Russia have supposedly launched on Ukraine, over 700 drones. Can we talk about that, please?
The subject matter. Thank you so much that you remind me. Thank you. I'm so appreciate. Highly. Thank you. Regarding this sanctions, see, before Donald Trump, he promised that it will be peacemaking dialogue between Russia and Ukraine. Right now, he changed his position. What we can do? What is our reaction should be? Only one kind of reaction I can propose. We should only pray for the heart of Donald Trump, because heart of the king in the hand of God. That's why we should only approach to the God. God will change his heart as easy as is. Because you see, we have our mission, we have our position, we will not change our position. Our president already confirmed a lot of times that is our nation position. He contribute himself to our nations. He cannot change it. If Donald Trump change his position, it's perfectly fine. It's related to him. We will not change our position at all. That's why you know that during all the history, last 1,000 years, not 100, last 1,000 years, nobody can press to the Russia and put to the Russia their decision. We always go to our goal, which is to save our nation, to be religious, to support traditions, support traditional values. That is our agenda. Nothing else. Nothing else. That's why we're not related to Donald Trump at all.
What are Russia saving from themselves from? That's a statement you've just made there. Of course, this war has been going on for around 40 months now, with further advances reported by Russian military within Ukraine, with attacks coming from Russia reportedly on civilian infrastructure, allegations of it going the other way. But I want to understand what it is exactly that you're saying. What is this ultimate aim of Vladimir Putin? Donald Trump seems to think that Vladimir Putin wanted peace. His rhetoric is changing on that. He's looking at secondary sanctions. So what is Vladimir Putin's aim that you keep talking about?
I will tell you that the last war with Nazi, with fascism, was 5 years. 5 years we fight, and we was winners. And this year, particularly this is 80th anniversary of our victory. And we contribute most lives. 20 millions of Russians was dedicated to this victory, sacrifice themselves. All our nations did the most biggest contribution. We should not forget about this. That's why, of course, Vladimir Putin, he's followed his words, and his activity confirmed all his words, that we try our level best bring peace, because peace cannot be installed without removing Nazi. Nazi, not like a movement, like a mood, like the last Nazi should be removed from the map of the Ukraine. That's why he's completely dedicated, and I'm highly appreciative of his mood. That's why America should not put pressure. More pressure they put to Russia, Russia will be more stronger. You should understand the character of Russian people. They always keep care about their dignity. You know, nobody can defeat Russians. Russian character, you can check with the Second War. How we
But Dr. Dvoryanov, who's trying to defeat Russia? Who's trying to defeat Russia? A full-scale invasion of Ukraine was launched by Russia. I don't understand what your point is. I'm trying to understand what it is that you're saying. We're looking at a geopolitical situation currently ongoing where there is wide Western media pressure on Russia to try and end this war, which Vladimir Putin himself has said that he's willing to negotiate towards a peace deal. I'm struggling to understand what point you're trying to make here.
Yes, peace deal is very required, but with acceptable conditions. We should understand, we are always... What about the Minsk agreement? All Western leaders came to the Minsk, it was agreement, then they told, even, you see, the leader of the Germany, former leader, she told that we just we just try to buy a time to destruct this Minsk agreement and to start expansion against Russia. That is their policy, that in their mind, in their heart. We cannot change the blood of the Western politicians. It's always last 1,000 years already in their blood, in their mentality. It will, because on enmity to the Russia. Russia has a big power because we always want to support justice in international relationships, nothing else. We should change the policy. If it will peacemaking dialogue, it should be very open, hard dialogue, without any hanky-panky, you know, like they have in mind one, they tell anything else. It should be proper with justice. We should sit on round table. We're open to peacemaking dialogue. Just we should sit and pray to the God, first of all. We should pray to the God. God will change the hearts of the Western politicians. Nothing else required.
Dr. Dvoryanov, thank you very much. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but I appreciate you giving up your time to speak with us. I am now going to be joined by my colleague, correspondent and anchor, Thomas Porteous, who is joining us live from the newsroom as we wait for him. Of course, this situation is a tense one. Discussions that have been had continuously regarding a potential ceasefire deal have then been followed by further military action reported by Russia and Ukraine against each country. I believe we are now joined by Thomas. We unfortunately didn't get the answers we wanted there on the latest news that we've had, Thomas, regarding these overnight strikes from Russia, a record number that has been reported by Ukraine. What more can you tell us about that and the diplomacy that has been had overnight?
Yes, Joshua, as you said, a record-breaking number aerial assaults, 728 drones and 13 ballistic missiles, all of which were intercepted by Ukrainian air defences, as far as we know. This symbolises an escalation in Russia's air attack that has been escalating over the past few months, even with this backdrop of supposed peace negotiations going on, negotiated by President Donald Trump. As you said, President Donald Trump's rhetoric on this situation seems to be shifting. There seems to be a possible secondary Western sanctions coming upon Russia, something that Moscow obviously does not want, given the current sanctions that are on them. There's also been shifts in military aid after initially halting some aid shipments to Ukraine, military aid shipments to Ukraine. The US seems to has now resumed that, but Trump has said he's been blindsided by Putin's actions in this war. As he said, famously that he was going to end this war in a single day after being in office. The war's now entering its 21st month, and now, as you previously said, that there has been peace deals drafted, temporary pauses, etc. Moscow has rejected those temporary pauses over and over again. There has been both a US and Ukraine brokered 30-day pause in the fighting. Moscow rejected that due to their demands not being met. And so once again, we will hopefully see new direct talks in Istanbul, as we've had two of them previously, which we've only seen prisoner swaps. So as this war goes, no serious breakthroughs, especially in regard to a peace deal, but unfortunately, escalating fighting.
Yes, absolutely, Thomas, and comments from Donald Trump overnight. Of course, with potential ramifications, we will bring you all of the updates on the ongoing Russia-Ukraine war as we get them. But now we stay in Europe, and German Chancellor Friedrich Merz says he is cautiously optimistic about reaching a tariff deal with the United States to avoid steep trade penalties. Speaking in Parliament, Merz said an agreement could be reached in the coming days or by the end of the month, that between the United States and the European Union. President Trump had threatened new tariffs on EU imports, including a 20% base rate, plus additional levies on cars, steel and aluminium. Implementation was delayed on August the 1st, giving negotiators extra time to try and strike a deal. Merz confirmed intensive negotiations are ongoing and said he is in direct contact with Trump, calling the deal vital for key industries. Well, I'm happy to say that our correspondent and anchor, Thomas Porteous, is once again joining us from the newsroom to provide more context on a potential trade deal between the EU and US in the time of uncertainty. Thomas, what can you tell us?
Well, not just the EU, but the world is scrambling once again, Joshua, to make these deals with the United States. When Donald Trump speaks, the world listens, and he has once again extended his tariff deadline from the 9th of this month all the way up to August the 1st. The European Union, which Germany is obviously a part of, was originally facing a tariff rate of 20%, along with, as you've mentioned, these auto tariffs and additional steel tariffs on top of them. Brussels is very much looking to negotiate a trade deal. The United States have so far only secured two significant finalized trade deals, though being the United Kingdom and Vietnam so far. But Brussels originally responded with the retaliatory tariffs before Donald Trump extended this tariff deadline. So we can ensure that the European will stand tough when it comes to negotiations. But of course, as we know, so will Donald Trump. And so we have to wait until this August the 1st deadline in order to see if a deal actually comes to fruition or not. Back to you, Josh.
Thomas Porteous, thank you very much for that insight. We stay in Europe once again as Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez says he will not step down despite a corruption scandal rocking his Socialist Party. Addressing Parliament, Sanchez admitted he had considered resigning but decided to continue leading. He said millions trust the government's vision and that he will not abandon it because of the actions of a few. The scandal involves two former socialist leaders and has shaken Spain's minority coalition government. Sanchez says the project for Spain's future must move forward, not be derailed. Let's have a look at what the Spanish Prime Minister said.
Por eso, señorías, no voy a tirar la toalla y voy a continuar, porque tenemos un gran proyecto de país en el que confían millones de personas, un proyecto que no podemos abandonar por la corrupción y la zafiedad de unos pocos que, por cierto, no pidieron permiso al resto y que fueron egoístas, que les dio igual jugarse lo que nunca fue suyo, que es la dignidad del gobierno y el presente y el futuro de España. No solo ha existido en una organización, existen otras, también en instituciones y en algunas empresas. Y si realmente queremos seguir reduciendo esta lacra social hasta acabar con ella definitivamente, tenemos que actuar también sobre estos espacios. Por eso, señorías, quiero anunciarles que el Gobierno de Coalición Progresista les propone a ustedes y también a los ciudadanos la aprobación de un plan estatal de lucha contra la corrupción. un plan estatal de lucha contra la corrupción dotado de 15 medidas de importante calado que hemos diseñado conjuntamente con un organismo multilateral como es la OCDE, en concreto con su prestigiosa división de anticorrupción e integridad en el gobierno.
Well, once again, we head to Thomas Porteous, who is joining us from the newsroom to talk about the ramifications of this decision. What can you tell us, Tom, about this scandal and about the statement by Prime Minister Sanchez?
Well, Joshua, corruption and sexual harassment is the key talking point in this scandal in Spain. It goes on as in the leftist leader in Spain has denied a resignation. This sexual harassment scandal follows one of Pedro Sanchez's very close advisors, Francisco Salazar, who was newly appointed within government. He has resigned following these allegations. However, some critics say that the accountability has not been met, with people wanting the leftist leader to resign. Another thing is the corruption, alleged corruption that has been going on inside Sanchez's party. The Spanish Prime Minister has unveiled a 15-point plan today, particularly to tackle this, as he is planning to move on from that sexual harassment scandal after the resignation of his colleague. I've got the 15-point plan here. I'm just going to read you some of the key terms. It includes barring convicted firms from these government contracts that were involved previously in these corruption scandals involving Sanchez's party, reducing centralized party power, protecting whistleblowers in regards to corruption, which is something that hasn't happened previously in the Spanish government and in the Spanish media, and inviting OECD involvement monitoring efforts. I've got another quote from Sanchez here. He says he's a clean politician and I will not throw in the towel. That is what he said. And so pressure will continue to mount for Sanchez. This situation is clearly not slowing down, and we will bring you all updates in regard to it.
Yes, absolutely, Thomas. As always, thank you ever so much for joining us. We now move on, but we stay in the region. Lithuania and Finland have announced plans to begin producing anti-personnel landmines next year, citing escalating security concerns over Russia. Both NATO members, which share borders with Russia, have formally begun the process of withdrawing from the 1997 Ottawa Convention that bans the use of such mines. The withdrawal takes 6 months, after which production could begin in early 2026. 3 other NATO and EU states, Poland, Latvia and Estonia, are also exiting the treaty. While none have confirmed production plans, officials in Poland and Latvia say they could start quickly if needed. Estonia says production remains a future option. Ukraine, which has already withdrawn from the treaty, argues landmines are vital for its defence. Russia never signed the convention. These moves highlight growing fears that Russia's military ambitions could extend beyond Ukraine and follow renewed calls from President Trump for NATO allies to boost defence spending amid regional instability. Here is what the Polish and Lithuanian defence ministers have said.
Proszę o jednolite głosowanie, o zagłosowanie za wycofaniem się z konwencji ottawskiej, o użyciu min przeciwpiechotnych. To jest nasz wniosek połączony z decyzją naszych partnerów z krajów bałtyckich i Finlandii. Polska nie może być objęta żadnym gorsetem uniemożliwiającym obronę naszej ojczyzny.
To acquire different sorts, different types of mines. Anti-tank are, especially important. Looking at the Russian tactics, how we're using, but also anti-personnel mines, because Russian tactics means that they use live force in very, so to say, forceful and then quite efficient manner. So we are still, so to say, in the process counting how many, what would be the proportions of the overall package that we will acquire. So, but it will consist. It will take, a significant part of our overall investment. So just in principle, saying that it's hundreds of millions for mines, for anti-tank mines, but also it will be part for anti-personnel mines as well. So it's still in the process of really evaluating and deciding. So it will be a significant amount.
Well, we now head away from Europe to South Asia, and some devastating news as at least 9 people have died and 5 others have been injured after a bridge partially collapsed in Gujarat's Vadodara district on Tuesday morning. The incident occurred over the Masagar River, causing several vehicles to plunge into the water below. Authorities say search and rescue operations are ongoing, with teams working to recover more people who may be trapped. Anil Damilaya, a senior civil official, confirmed the death toll and said efforts are underway to minimise further loss of life. Emergency services remain at the scene and the cause of the collapse is under investigation. Well, joining us live is Anand Singh, an assistant director, joining us in New Delhi to discuss this tragedy. Anand, what can you tell us?
Yeah, Thomas, look, the bridge that collapsed, the bridge was known as the Gambhira Mujpur Bridge that connected Anand district and Vadodara district of Gujarat. So that bridge, which was 4 decades old, collapsed today early in the morning, and 4 of the vehicles are said to be plunged into the water. So the rescue team operations are working round the clock over there, and they are trying to look for the survivors, as 9 people have been confirmed dead in this accident that took place in Gujarat's Vadodara, because this was the bridge that connected the central Gujarat from the Saurashtra region in the western state. So clearly, this is a massive tragedy over there, the way in which the bridge has collapsed, and an inquiry has been ordered to ascertain that what led to such a disaster over there, that the bridge collapsed when the vehicles were crossing on the same. And as 6 people have been injured, they have been sent to hospital, while several of the rescue team officials are still working on the site to look for any of the survivors, as they have been able to bring out 3 of the people from the water of the Mahisagar River in Gujarat. Back to you.
Yes, Anand, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight. We will, of course, bring you all of the updates as we get them from that bridge collapse. Moving on now, and a plane which reportedly is a fighter jet of the Indian Air Force has crashed in an open field in Churu, Rajasthan. Thick smoke was seen billowing from the crash sites, and visuals show the aircraft completely charred. 2 people have been reported dead and 2 injured so far. As per reports, one of the pilots' bodies was also found at the wreckage of the crash site. According to reports, the extent of the damage and cause of the crash are yet to be determined. Rescue teams are on the spot. More details are awaited, and again, we will bring those to you as we get them. Moving on now, and Abdullah Öcalan, the jailed leader of the outlawed Kurdistan Workers' Party, known as the PKK, has appeared in a rare online video to declare the group's armed struggle against Turkey over and calling for a full transition to democratic politics. In the recording, Öcalan urged Turkey's parliament to set up a commission to oversee disarmament and manage a broader peace protest. The PKK, which has waged an insurgency against the Turkish state for 4 decades and is designated a terror organisation by Turkey, the United States and the European Union, decided in May to disband after an initial written appeal from Öcalan in February. Since the PKK launched its insurgency in 1984, originally with the aim of creating an independent Kurdish state, the conflict has seen more than 40,000 people killed, while imposed a heavy economic burden and fuelled deep social and political divisions in the region. Let's listen in to what Abdullah Öcalan, the jailed PKK leader, has said.
Varlık inkarına dayalı ve ayrı devlet amaçlı PKK hareketi ve dayandığı ulusal kurtuluş savaş stratejisine son verilmiştir. Varlık tanınmış, dolayısıyla ana amaç gerçekleşmiştir. Sürecin geneli olarak silahların gönüllüce bırakılması ve Türkiye Büyük Millet Meclisi'nde yetkili ve kanunla tüm anlatılanlardan çıkarılan sonuç PKK ulus devletçi bir amaçtan vazgeçmiş. Bu temel amaçtan vazgeçişle birlikte temel savaş stratejisinden de vazgeçmiş, varlığını sona erdirmiştir. Yapılan silahlı mücadele aşamasında demokratik siyaset ve hukuk aşamasına gönüllüce geçiştir. Bu bir kayıp değil, tarihi bir kazanım olarak değerlendirilmek durumundadır.
We head back to Europe, and the recent heatwave across the continent has claimed 2,300 lives in just 12 cities, with a staggering 15,000 of those deaths directly attributed to climate change. That is according to a recent scientific report. From June the 23rd to July the 2nd, record-breaking temperatures soared, with cities like Milan, Paris and Barcelona suffering the worst. According to scientists, human-driven climate breakdown pushed temperatures up by as much as 4 degrees Celsius, intensifying the heatwave and leading to a tragic increase in fatalities. Older individuals were disproportionately affected, with 88% of the climate-driven deaths occurring in those over the age of 65. Unlike storms or wildfires, which leave visible destruction, heatwaves often cause fatalities behind closed doors. With the Mediterranean also experiencing its most extreme marine heatwave ever, ecosystems are suffering and fish populations are being severely impacted. Experts warn that as the planet warms, heatwaves are expected to become more frequent and intense, threatening both human health and biodiversity across the continent of Europe. Well, joining us to discuss this report and this development, Professor Sergei Roginko, head of the Environment Centre at the Institute of Europe, joining us from Moscow. Thank you ever so much, Sergei, for being here. We've heard, of course, there that around 2,300 deaths recorded in just a 10-day period. But can you provide some context on just why this is happening? Is this year an outlier, or is heat waves of this extent across Europe and the rest of the world the new norm?
Well, let me tell you first that it is not a climate breakdown. It's a weather anomaly. Heat waves are more or less regular in the world. And what happened to Europe now? It's an anticyclone that is holding the hot air over Europe. This event may last for weeks, but now this heat wave is moving to Russia, and we are experiencing 33 degrees today and expecting 34 tomorrow. So as for the climate, yes, the climate is changing, but the weather anomalies are more or less regular. And if we see the records of past 50 years, we can see that things are happening more or less regularly. And this regularity didn't change a lot during the 50 years that we can observe. To say more, of course, 2,000 deaths, it's a lot. But let us compare with the same event 23 years ago in Europe, the heat wave of 2003. There were 70,000 victims. What does it mean? It means that the civilization is adapting to the changes. The civilization is adapting to the global warming. And for example, in France, 40 years ago, you couldn't see even a single air conditioner. Now, the figures show that around 30% of Frenchmen are using air conditioning. That means that what we thoroughly need, looking at the global warming, is we need to adapt. There should be more finance in adaptation, because everyone is obsessed with financial schemes, with climate change mitigation, and with energy transit.
Yes.
The energy transit has cost around $10 trillion. why won't we take some money from this fast sum and add it to adaptation, and it gives much more effect in my mind.
Yes.
Thank you.
Sergey, you will stay with us as we move away from Europe, and 3 people have been found dead in southern New Mexico after flash floods tore through the Ruidoso area, the same region hit by wildfires last year. A 4-year-old girl, a 7-year-old boy and a man in his 40s was swept away by rising waters on Tuesday afternoon. Torrential rain triggered the flooding, with the Rio Ruidoso surging to a record 20 feet, 5 feet above its previous high. A house was seen floating downstream. Officials say 85 rescues were carried out, with people pulled from homes and vehicles. Governor Michelle Lujan Grisham signed an emergency declaration saying Ruidoso deserves the same federal response seen in Texas. The National Weather Service initially issued a flood watch, but quickly escalated it to a flash flood emergency, its highest alert, targeting the South Fork Burns Scar. Well, thank you for staying with us, Professor Rygenko. This is the second flash flooding, second amount of deadly flash flooding we've seen in North America in the last week. What's the significance of flash flooding of this type, and why does it happen so quickly without warning for civilians who are just going about their everyday life? Well, while we wait for Professor Rygenko to join, of course, this news, I believe, in fact, Professor Rygenko is here. I will rephrase my question to you, Professor. This is the second incident in North America that we've seen of devastating and deadly flash flooding. Why is this happening, and why does it happen so quickly, catching civilians going about their day-to-day life off guard? As we've seen in Texas after a few days, the devastation and the loss of life can be huge.
I think it's a problem of early warning system. I think the early warning systems were not adequate, or maybe they could be outdated. But even in the best cases, we can see the same events happening 20 years ago in Florida, when New Orleans was flooded, and even the best warning systems that existed in the United States were not able to do anything on this issue. I think this is a natural disaster, and it does not have any relations with the global warming. It's a regular disaster, like hurricanes, like tornadoes, that do happen regularly, and the only thing that is needed is early warning systems and some shelters and the adequacy of the emergency services.
Yes, Professor Rygenko, thank you ever so much for joining us and providing that insight there. We will, of course, continue to bring you all of the updates from the latest North American flash flooding that has led to deaths. We move on now, and Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov is set to visit North Korea this weekend from July the 11th to July the 13th at the invitation of the North Korean Foreign Ministry. The visit comes as Moscow and Pyongyang continue to deepen military and strategic relations. Lavrov's trip follows multiple visits by Russia's security chief Sergei Shoigu to Pyongyang, including one last month to mark the first anniversary of a sweeping military pact signed by the two countries. North Korea has emerged as a key ally for Russia during its ongoing conflict in Ukraine, providing thousands of troops and weapons to support Russian forces. Pyongyang has confirmed the deployment of North Korean soldiers to fight alongside Russian troops in Ukraine, with some casualties reported. As ties between the two heavily sanctioned nations grow stronger, international observers will monitor closely this visit amid concerns over the implications for regional security. Well, joining us on the programme is Ross Feingold, political analyst, joining us from Taipei. As always, thank you ever so much, Ross, for taking the time to speak with us. I ended that short segment there talking about implications for regional security. What might they be?
I think going forward in the future, although Russia is very busy, obviously, fighting its war in Ukraine, but the possibility of Russia-North Korea joint exercises or Russia-China-North Korea joint exercises in the Pacific off Russia's eastern coast, as well as China and North Korea's eastern coast, is certainly a possibility to the extent that Russia has naval or other military assets that it could devote to such endeavors. And of course, that is a concern. It's a concern for South Korea. It's a concern for Japan. It's a concern for the United States, which is, of course, a treaty ally of both South Korea and Japan. So again, keeping in mind the resources constraint that Russia has, but to the extent that it could overcome that, any type of joint military activity that North Korea, Russia, and possibly together with China undertake in the Pacific region is certainly a concern for a number of countries in this part of the world.
Yes, and Ross, very briefly before we move on, looking at the wider geopolitical impacts, with the US slightly shifting their rhetoric back towards pressure on Vladimir Putin with potential sanctions. A lot of the Western world, of course, backing Ukraine in that war against Russia. Is there a risk here of there being a clear divide between two parties, something that we haven't seen realistically since the Cold War era?
Certainly, and that's happening already in many ways, because for the most part, countries in Europe, with only a few exceptions, have taken Ukraine's side in the war. And even here in the Pacific region, South Korea, Japan, although they may have been slower than the Western countries, they've eventually supported Ukraine. Australia has joined the Western countries. Even smaller countries like Singapore have taken a kind of international law, United Nations view, and have criticized Russia's invasion of a sovereign country, Ukraine. So we do see countries taking sides. There are parts of the world, of course, where that's not happening, most notably the Middle East and Africa.
Yes, Ross, stay with us, because we're going to stay in the Indo-Pacific, and Taiwan has kicked off its largest ever military exercises, simulating attacks on its command systems and infrastructure in preparation for a potential Chinese invasion. The annual Han Kuan drills, which began today, focused on decentralizing Taiwan's military command to ensure resilience in case of a communication breakdown. Over the next 10 days, the drills will assess Taiwan's combat readiness in a full-scale military conflict. This year, the exercise will mobilize 22,000 reservists and include advanced weaponry such as HIMARS rocket systems and Taiwan-developed Skysword missiles. The drills also come as Taiwan faces growing military pressure from China, which views the island as part of its territory. While Taiwan's defense officials assert that these exercises demonstrate their readiness to defend the island, China has dismissed them as a bluff, insisting that Taiwan cannot resist the might of the People's Liberation Army. The international community is closely monitoring both Taiwan's preparedness and China's response, with analysts warning that any escalation could ignite a broader regional conflict. Well, Ross, thank you for staying with us. Of course, joining us from Taipei, perfectly placed to discuss this drill. We've spoken many times on NewsX World about drills from China, flexing the military might of China. How significant is this drill from Taiwan's perspective in real terms, looking at a potential risk of invasion, which becomes more and more imminent as tensions rise?
Well, the practical effect or importance of these drills is it is a large-scale exercise. It involves the different branches of the military, and it really is meant to simulate a Chinese invasion. So it is Taiwan's largest annual military exercise. This is the 41st year that they've been conducting it. And as you mentioned, there are a lot of international observers, most notably the United States, but also countries that are friendly to Taiwan, like Japan, that are watching closely the capabilities of the Taiwan military. Now, something very important to keep in mind for this year's drills is that in the past, one of the main criticisms of this drill was that it was heavily scripted, that a lot of it was done to make the politicians happy, make the president happy, and make the media happy, and show something positive that nothing goes wrong, so that it generates positive media coverage for Taiwan's military. This year, something different. The politicians, the president, and the Ministry of National Defense, they've made an effort to say that this year is not going to be as scripted in the past. And we're just going to see what happens with the simulations. We're not going to hide what might go wrong. And I think the public here in Taiwan, as well as military experts, they're looking forward to seeing that and how truly unscripted it is. Because obviously, when a war occurs, it's not going to happen according to a script.
Yes, absolutely. Ross, stay with us. We're just going to briefly look at China, which has dismissed claims by Berlin that the Chinese military had directed a laser at a German aircraft over the Red Sea as completely inconsistent with the facts. This comes after the Foreign Ministry in Berlin said that a German aircraft participating in a routine EU-led mission to protect marine traffic in the Red Sea had been targeted by a laser, endangering personnel. Berlin described the incident as entirely unacceptable. Berlin also said that the reconnaissance aircraft involved had been forced to abandon its mission and return to a base in Djibouti. Meanwhile, the Chinese Foreign Ministry spokeswoman Mao Ning said that Chinese naval vessels had been carrying out escort duties in the Gulf of Aden and in Somali waters. So let's take a closer look at what she said.
经向有关部门了解，德方所称的信息与中方了解的事实完全不符。中国海军在亚丁湾、索马里海域实施护航行动，履行大国责任，为维护国际航道安全作出贡献，也同德方和欧方保持着良好的沟通。双方应当本着实事求是的态度，及时加强沟通，避免误解误判。
Well, we'll now take a look at the latest news coming from the world of sports. According to reports, Red Bull boss Christian Horner has been released from his operational duties with the F1 team. This sensational news ends the longest reign of a Formula One team principal after he led the team for 20 years. But this year Red Bull have suffered on the track, sitting fourth in the current constructors' standings. Well, this comes a year after the scandal which engulfed Horner over texts he apparently sent to a female employee. Horner was, however, cleared of all wrongdoing in this case. Red Bull has issued a statement confirming the news. Now Laurent Mekies has resumed Horner's position. To football, and João Pedro stunningly marked his Chelsea debut, scoring twice to help the Premier League side defeat Fluminense 2-0 at the Club World Cup in the semi-finals. The Brazilian forward's first goal came on the 18th minute, followed by a second-half strike that sealed the victory. Chelsea will now face either Real Madrid or PSG in Sunday's final. Chelsea manager Enzo Maresca expressed his delight, calling the season a fantastic achievement. To cricket, a New Zealand opener Finn Allen will miss the upcoming T20 Tri-Series in Zimbabwe due to a foot injury he sustained while playing for San Francisco Unicorns in Major League Cricket. The 26-year-old's recovery timeline will be assessed after further consultations in New Zealand. The New Zealand squad, led by Mitchell Santner, includes promising debutant Bevan Jacobs with leg spinner Ish Sodhi, praising Jacobs' destructive batting style ahead of the team's opener against South Africa on July the 16th. To tennis, and Alfie Hewitt dominantly began his Wimbledon title defence, securing a 6-1, 6-2 victory over Spain's Daniel Cavazacci in just 54 minutes. The 27-year-old 10-time major singles champion will face China's Ji Zhengzhu in the quarter-finals. Meanwhile, Hewitt's doubles partner Gordon Reid triumphed in a tough three-setter against Belgium's Joachim Gerard, and the pair are set to defend their doubles crown starting on Wednesday. However, British wildcard Dannon Ward suffered a heavy defeat to Martin de la Puente. Back to football, and Wales's Euro 2025 team bus was involved in a crash on the way to their training session at St Gallen. The Football Association of Wales confirmed that all players and staff on board were uninjured, though the driver of another vehicle was taken to hospital with minor injuries. The planned training session was cancelled, but the team later resumed preparations at their base in Weinfelden. Wales head coach Rhian Wilkinson assured the public that everyone was safe and in good health. And to basketball, three-time NBA MVP Nikola Jokic has decided to delay signing a contract extension with the Denver Nuggets this summer, according to an AP source. Despite the delay, Jokic under contract for at least 2 more seasons, with player options extending through to the 27-28 season. Jokic could sign a more lucrative deal next summer, extending his contract by 4 years. The decision does not impact his current status with the team, as the Nuggets respect his choice and will present both options for the future. Well, that's all we have time for, but we will continue to bring you more of the latest breaking news from across the world.